Welcome to another episode of the Victory Podcast, driven by Audi. I'm your host, Keely, Eure, joined by my co-host and former USC quarterback, Cody Kessler. Cody, I'm excited for this episode. It's kind of new for us. It's an instant reaction episode. If you haven't heard, USC had its introductory press conference for its full new defensive staff for this season. So we got to hear from everyone, including head coach Lincoln Riley. So there's a lot of thoughts. I took a lot of notes, Cody. You and I were texting during it. It feels like we're on the same page, not to pre-pod before we get into it, but I'm excited to kind of react to what we heard today.
Well, I think this was a big one for USC fans, for us in general too, because we've been waiting so long and we've been talking about these coaches for so long, but we haven't heard from them yet. So it was awesome. And they've been out recruiting, doing a lot of things. But it was awesome to finally have them in-house and in the USC team meeting room, hear from them on a more personal level too, getting to know them a little bit before we get into spring ball. But yeah, it's a different episode. I know we just did the video or the actual video clips last week talking about the transfer portals. We read the comments. We know you guys love those, so we are absolutely going to do more of those. But this is exactly what Keely said. It's a just instant reaction. I know it's a quick turnaround for you, but Keely's going to try to edit this by tonight, get it out either tonight or early tomorrow morning. And for those of you that listen to the press conference, I watched it live. And everybody kind of interacting in the discussion boards on there was really cool to see in the live chat. But yeah, overall it's awesome to hear a lot of great talking points from these coaches too, and I can't wait to kind of explain what we saw. So if you missed the press conference, we're going to explain all of it, add some quotes in as well, or we're going to
commentary.
Explain some commentary. But if you want to go back and watch it, I highly recommend that as well. Don't leave the podcast right now. I'm not saying that, but watch both if you can. But go listen to it. It was great to hear from these coaches, and it got me excited for USC football, and I can't wait for this defensive staff to take the field with these players.
It's wild, too, because not only did we have the presser today, we also got some news about the dates of spring camp. It's coming up quick. Spring camp will start on March 19th. USC's Pro Day is on March 20th, and the spring game, which is open to fans in the Coliseum, is on April 20th. So just get that in your heads because it's coming down the pipeline really quick. And I know we say this every season, Cody, but it really is coming up on us quick.
Yeah, it does. And it feels like especially doing the podcast, because we talk every week, and this is just, I guess, for me personally, I don't know your opinion, but it feels like, all right, we got to trying to find stuff to talk about or something interesting, because it feels a little bit like a dead period, if you will. But
a little bit, yeah.
Then it's like fast forward, right? We're in spring ball. Then
it's too fast.
Yeah, and then the turnaround's so fast, but it's a good problem to have, right? I'm excited. I know a lot of USC fans are excited. The press conferences today, listening to each coach individually, especially Coach Henderson, and I'll explain why.
Gosh,
but
I know.
Had me ready to run through a brick wall. I wish we had a game tomorrow. But then Lynn kind of slowed it down a little bit and said, hey, we're going to go very slow through the spring as well. We got to install everything and take our time and do this the right way. But yeah, overall, right around the corner, and I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And like you said, last week was kind of like a more polished version of the show. We had like play-by-plays and stuff. And today's going to be, I'm reading off my note sheet. We're having a conversation, but it's a reaction. We wanted to give you a quick episode about what we heard today. So this is how it's going to be produced.
Well, it's good. Yeah. And you asked me about this last week. You said, hey, they're doing a press conference. The coaches are finally going to talk on the defensive side of the ball. The new coaches, would you like to do an instant reaction? I'm like, we've never done it, but yeah, I mean, I think it's better to watch it. And if you missed the press conference, if not everybody has time to sit there and watch a 3-hour press conference, we're going to give you the highlights of all that and then give our instant reaction, how we feel about it, kind of interpretate a little bit too from a player standpoint, hearing from Lynn and Ertz and Henderson and Belt, kind of what their philosophy is and what they meant by what they were saying. But I'm so excited for all four of them. I think it's a huge movement in the right direction for USC football, and Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen. Again, I know we praised them a lot about this new staff, but that just reiterated it today. Hearing from those coaches, they made the perfect hires, and it's tough to really say that, I guess, or give your full analysis before they've even taken the field. But just from press conference today and the eye test and all of that and saying the right things and the philosophy and how they're going to teach these young men and get these players to develop to get to the NFL and to have a national championship winning program, check. I mean, it checked every box for me today. I can't wait to get into it. But yeah, I'm so excited about this staff. And for everyone who said, Lincoln Riley's an offensive guru, he doesn't care about defense, that argument is out the window. You can't say that anymore. Again, what he and Cohen have done by hiring the staff shows that he knows that defense wins championships. Yes, we're still going to have a great offense, and he's, in my opinion, the best play caller in all of college football. But he has absolutely addressed all those defensive questions, and this staff is perfect.
Oh, you have me ready to get into this podcast.
I am. I got the chills just I'm not even joking. This press conference was awesome to watch today. And like you said, we were texting the whole time, and I know we're doing the preview before we actually get into the Keely meat and potatoes of the episode. But that's how exciting this podcast was, and the live chat and everyone that was on board and everyone that was listening. You could feel that through YouTube video, which is awesome to have.
For sure. Hopefully you feel it in this YouTube video as well if you are watching live or watching on YouTube. But also if you're watching, we have a different setup. We don't have the Cardinal background in case anyone cares about the behind the scenes. They're using the studio for something else today, so that's also why we look like a theater production right now.
Yeah, that's what Keely. We look like a high school theater little backdrop, but a lot of moving parts.
Yes.
Got an interview coming up in a little bit, so you won't know this, but we take a quick break while they got to use the room in the studio. All the press was on, or media was on campus today too, doing that. So a lot of moving parts, but again, this is the definition of instant reaction.
Yeah.
Like it ended just over an hour and a half ago, and we're already down here in the studio recording and trying to squeeze in and get some studio time. But yeah, I'm excited for this episode and a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Alrighty, before we jump into it, just a couple of reminders. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to go above and beyond, you can leave a review on wherever you get your podcasts. It helps grow the show, and we greatly appreciate everyone who's done it so far. Also, and this doesn't apply to this episode, and I will get into it, but if you ever want to get your voice heard, be sure to look out for a tweet or a question box either on Twitter or Instagram. Our socials are VictoryPod USC. And like we said, we're trying to make this a quick upload. So part of that is not asking any questions and having to have a longer episode. That means a longer edit time. So sorry for no questions today, but I'm sure whatever you want to ask, make sure to get it in next week, and we'll be sure to answer it.
Well, I'm sure, too, after this episode ends, and
they'll have more time to watch.
Well, yeah, listen to our reaction and then have some follow-up questions as well. But yeah, there's no, if you're wondering why, we didn't forget about you guys. But yeah, we didn't put any questions out this week for the instant reaction.
And one last thought before we go into the meat and potatoes, Cody. Just want to give a thanks to Audi. Performance is more exhilarating on a real road. Introducing the Audi Q5. Visit your SoCal Audi dealers, proud sponsors of the USC Trojans. And at Ralph's, everyone wins when it comes to saving big, because when you order online through the Ralph's app, you get the same great prices, deals, and rewards on pickup or delivery that you do in store. So no matter how you shop, you always save big at Ralph's. Ralph's, fresh for everyone. Fight on.
Fight on.
Alrighty, Cody, well, let's jump into it. First up in the presser was Lincoln Riley. I'm just going to go chronologically because that's where it is in my head right now and my notes.
Perfect.
First up, he said that they wanted to shoot big when it came to revamping the defensive staff. He said he actually pointed to a whiteboard in the room and said, we took that whiteboard into my office and we put 7 names on the board. And he described it as the dream list. And he said we ended up hiring 4 out of the 7 of the dream list. And he was like, I think that's a pretty good percentage. So
yeah, I love that. That's, like you said, very high. It's over 50%. And it's difficult to be able to do that. And we've talked about what he did to get some of those coaches here, right? It wasn't just him going and talking to position coaches who were trying to work their way up in the college football world, the coaching world, if you will, and come here at USC. He went and got a head coach, a national championship FCS winning head coach in Ince. He also went and got Danton Lynn, who just spent his first year at UCLA, to come over here and be a defensive coordinator at USC. He also went and got Henderson, who was at the NFL, right? And it's tough for an NFL coach to know, I'm going to give up my offseason, right? You get in the NFL, yes, you have to deal with the combine, the scouting, all of that stuff, but you have people in those departments that take care of that, the scouting and going and watching the combine, watching game film, doing all that. You really get an offseason in the NFL. He got Coach Henderson to come here, commit to USC, and also commit to an 11-month job, right? An 11.5 month, having to recruit, having to be on the road, going from one world in the NFL now to the college atmosphere. So it's unbelievable. And then obviously Coach Belk as well coming over to coach the secondary. It's unbelievable the fact that Lincoln and Cohen were able to be that aggressive, to have 7 names and to get 4 of them, get over 50% and have them come here to USC and take a lesser role, if you will. I mean, obviously, it's USC, and you know, Coach N spoke about it. It's one of the blue bloods of the college football world. One of the schools where the logo has a lot more meaning when it comes to that next step in their coaching career. But it was unbelievable to see what they did. And we've talked about this before, but to hear Lincoln talk about it and hear the coaches back that up is amazing. And I love what he said about how aggressive they were in getting the job done, and they absolutely did that. Yeah,
Lincoln described it as a shot of momentum to the program, and I feel like after sitting through that presser and hearing the coaches talk, you understand that because they brought so much energy and just a fresh energy as well to the whole environment. And it's interesting because for the last 2 years we've been talking about the defense, and now it just is such a different feel to it. I don't know if you felt that way too, Cody.
Yeah, and I said that in the intro of this episode about the live chat. Like, you really, I think it was close to 1,000 people in there at one point, and listening to Coach Henderson speak, listening to Lynn really break down what his philosophy was, and going down the list, all these coaches kind of talking about their background and what they believe and what they want USC defense to look like. I love what Henderson said about, I want a defensive line that's respected and feared by the rest of the country. I don't want, my job here just to be great recruit, great coach. Okay, get your job done, go to the NFL. I want to really put in place kind of what Lincoln spoke about before, a culture that's not only going to last through, this first couple of years of me coaching, but for years to come, about a defensive line, a defense that's feared, that's respected throughout the entire country. And I'm so excited about that. And the live chat really felt that as well. And they backed up everything that I'm saying right here and let's not get too far ahead. It's easy to do that, You can
always win the press conference.
Yeah, you can always win the press conference. But you saw a lot of fans and they're saying, we're going 10-2, we're going undefeated, we're winning the Big Ten. Yes, absolutely. We have the coaching staff to do that. But again, I've always talked about and preached, we've got to get the players as well. And it's still, we've added some good players in the transfer portal. If you didn't hear last episode, we broke all that down. We've got some freshmen coming in that I think have an opportunity to make an impact, but still you have to, year in and year out, build that culture. And you also have to retain guys to be able to have continuity, consistency around your program. It's tough to plug and place and have guys come in for a one and done, I guess, if you will, through the transfer portal and have consistency on the defensive side of the football. But we're really, in the right direction and national championship caliber coaching staff, check, in my opinion, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
I'm glad you brought up the transfer portal and retention because I felt like, especially in Lincoln Riley's portion of the day, you could sense the shift in philosophy. And they've talked about it a lot, about how, when they first got to USC, they had to go to the portal immediately and try and revamp the roster. But Riley made sure to say that we want to push away from the portal going forward. He was like, we want guys to be here, in a more traditional sense. But I feel like the way that they're going to combat the retention aspect of college football right now is to develop guys and be like, you need to be here all, however, 3 or 4 many years, because that continuity with this staff is going to help you to your ultimate goal, which is the NFL. I feel like the word we kept hearing today was develop, whether it was they're going to develop players or these coaches know how to teach and develop the players. It was a lot of the word develop throughout the day. And overall, Riley was like, we want you to come here and stay here, which seems like this is the anecdote to the portal craziness is we're going to do things more traditionally. We're going to really invest in you as a player and as a person, obviously, but that way you can have this tenure at USC and feel ready for your ultimate goal, which is the NFL.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, and that was perfect kind of leading into how I feel about the transfer portal because look, going back to when Riley first got here, and you just mentioned that, he had to flip the roster, right? You had to. We had a program the year before that was 4-8. You came in, and what you can do in today's world of college football with the transfer portal is you absolutely can flip a roster. He had to do that, right? Check. We got that done. The following year, we won 11 games. He brought some guys with him from Oklahoma. He got some guys that he's recruited before, some people that he was familiar with, and also some people that were within the Pac-12 that came in and made an impact, right? So I'm glad he did that to start off, but I am fully on board with that right now, and I think development is a perfect word to use. That is the most important word for a high school recruit coming into a college football world, into an atmosphere, to a team of knowing what the culture is going to be like. How can you develop me and how much better can I get when I step on campus to when I leave campus, right? That's the most important part. And for me, if I'm a parent nowadays with a kid going to a program, or if I'm a kid going to a program, it's tough to block out the NIL, the money, all of that, all the opportunities, yes. But the most important thing for a coach, for me, is how are you as a leader? What is the culture going to be like, and how are you going to develop young men? Not just football players, but young men. How you're going to develop a player that can go perform on the field, but also as a leader in the community. That's a leader amongst his teammates. That's what people want in the NFL, right? That's what these GMs, these owners, that's what they look for, these head coaches in the NFL. Henderson knows that. Lincoln Riley knows that. He's had multiple #1 overall picks. They've had experience of developing players to go being high draft picks. Danton Lynn is about to have a high-end first-rounder with Latu, right? He's going to be a first-round pick. He's got multiple guys that are going to play on Sundays, and a lot of these coaches have spent time in the NFL, but that's why I know I'm harping on a lot, but that's so important, the development of young men. You have to be able to make a player better from the day he steps foot on campus, reaching his full potential to the time that he leaves for the NFL draft, and the biggest part of that is continuity, retention, keeping guys around. It's tough. and you can do this, but it's tough to make a huge impact on a player when you only get, and it's not even a full year, right? You get a transfer guy that comes in, especially the later windows
summer,
guy.
Maybe?
Yeah, they come in the summer and then they're done by the time season ends. Even some of them don't even make it to the bowl games, right? So you're getting 5-6 months with a guy, maybe if you're lucky. It's tough to really develop a player in that sense, but I love that. I think that's the most important part. Yes, we had to flip the roster when Lincoln first got here, going from 4 wins to 11. You don't do that unless you add in some firepower. Obviously brought Caleb Williams and a lot of people around him. But now that we've really seen the turnaround of USC football, I know last year 7 or 8 wins, counting the bowl game, wasn't where we wanted to be, but it's still better than we were 2 years ago, right? We do have players that are going to be here next year that we can build off of. Obviously, our quarterback is one of them, but overall, you have to be able to, year in and year out, keep that consistency. I can't tell you how important it is as a football player to feel comfortable with the guys around you. And the last point I'll make before we move on is look at the dynasties in the NFL. That's where it really becomes important, right? The Chiefs right now, you had the Patriots for a long time. They did such a great job of retaining their big-time players. Now, yes, you're going to have to go portal free agency and add some key pieces that you need, and guys are going to leave, whether it's guys going to transfer or guys that are graduating and go to the draft, but you keep your core players around as long as you can for 3 or 4 years. That is going to help you be successful and continue to build that dynasty, if you will, or that consistency within your program.
And I would assume it's easier to maintain the culture that you want when you have the same players that are brought up in a certain system. And relating it back to the Holiday Bowl, when one of the main mantras we heard from the players after the game was the players who wanted to be here are still here, and we work for this win. Does it speak to, if you have a portal construction of a roster, does that mean that you don't have that mental rhythm of everyone together? I don't know, but I do think it's we know that it works if you have a culture that you instill for several years with a certain roster. So is it easier to be go more traditionally about this? I don't know, but it seems like that's the route that USC wants to go in.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You're going to have to compete in the portal, right? You're going to have to go get players, especially when big name players come available, or you lose guys, or you have a position group that maybe doesn't have a ton of depth there, whether it's guys leaving, guys graduating, whatever it may be. You're going to have to be aggressive in the portal. I get that, right? But it's tough to bring in 50-plus guys from the portal every year and have consistency and a team that can play together, have that togetherness. It's tough to have that.
That's what I was looking for,
But overall, like, for me, going back to the Matt Barkley episode, right? I learned everything about USC football from watching Leinart, watching Sanchez, watching those guys when I was growing up, but then getting here at USC and learning from Matt Barkley, who learned from those guys, who spent time in recruiting, talking to Mark Sanchez, to Leinart, to guys that played before him. And if you can continue year in and year out to have those freshmen, those younger guys, and it's tough because, like I said, like it's tough for me to say this a little bit because we just had a guy who came from a different program, won the Heisman Trophy, and is one of the greatest quarterbacks to play at this program.
But that's also why that first season was so unique.
Yeah.
It's rare.
Yeah, it is rare. It is, but at the same time, we also had a Jordan Addison who is a first-round pick. We also had guys that came in and really kind of took over a lot of starting roles up front on the defense. So it's tough for me to say, stay away from the portal or be more freshman-oriented or recruiting-oriented where you can build guys up. There's push and pull. It's tough to say both, but at the end of the day, I love, as a former guy that learned from the tradition of USC football and what it meant to be a Trojan, and that's kind of what Lincoln Riley's putting his own, I guess, flavor, if you will, into that and what USC football is all about. I think it's important to have younger guys that you can really develop and build into the leaders of the program that you want in the future, and you have to be able to retain guys and keep that continuity.
Two other newsy things for me out of the Riley portion. One, just basically noting that both Deuce Robinson and Zachariah Branch will be dual sporting this spring, which is exciting. Deuce, obviously, we've talked about, very committed to baseball. Zachariah Branch is going to be in track. We know his speed, so that makes a lot of sense. But Riley said he doesn't expect them to miss too much spring ball. And then the other news for me was talking about the portal and quarterback depth. And Riley said that there was not much of a need to pursue anyone that was older, and spoke a little bit about Jaden Mayava. He said he has a lot of great ball ahead of him, and we're going to let those guys, meaning Miller and Jaden, duke it out this spring. So Riley basically just said competition's on. So we'll see. And
that's why you come to USC, right? Now, he's not going to say this because he wants open competition. Obviously, in my opinion, and again, take it for what it is. But I obviously Miller has to step up right now. He's been here. He's played actual football at this program, but we watched Maeva's tape. He played as a freshman. He has a chance to come in and compete. I love that. Open it up, right? When I played at USC my sophomore year, I was a starter. Besides those first 2 games when I split reps, I was a starter for the next, I think 8 or 9 games, and we went 7-2 or 6-2. As soon as season ended and Sark came in, I had Max Brown, who was a top 5-star recruit at the time out of high school, coming in. I had other guys that were still competing, and the first thing that Sark said was, quarterback job's open. Cody did a lot of great things last year. He competed. He won a lot of 110 games as a starter, showed a lot of potential, but quarterback job's open. I love that as a competitor. I took that as, hey, here we go again, right? I just did that last year. It helped me to grow and become better, and ended up having a great junior year and put up a lot of numbers and a lot of stats because that I didn't get complacent, right? I have that competitiveness in me, and Coach Sark did a great job of forcing me to get better because he knew there was a 5-star on my heels. There was other guys that were here that were competing with me. So I love that. Then Lincoln said that, but at the end of the day, it's obviously still Miller's job to lose. And I also, back to the point of going to get a freshman quarterback, I'm totally good with that. We don't need a veteran. We have a veteran in the room in Miller Moss. He's been here for, I think now 4 years, right?
Yes, time has flown.
Yeah,
yes.
It's crazy, but he's been here for 4 years now. So even though he's only, I think, a junior,
yes,
because of the COVID year and the red shirt and all of that, but he's the veteran on the team, right? You add a younger guy that can learn from Miller and also compete with him and push him to get better. I love that, and I think it's going to be an awesome battle to watch this spring.
Let's move over to Danton Lynn. The first thing, it was satisfying for me because I've had a question for so long since he's been hired and since you've been breaking down his defense. Iconically, Cody, you've said it's a funky defense.
Yeah.
It looks different a lot pre-snap, post-snap.
Versatility.
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah.
Which has begged the question for me, how does his players stay assignment sound? How do they know what they're doing? And he answered it by saying, it's a very, very slow install. He said, we do half of the playbook in the entire spring. And so that to me was fascinating because I was so curious, how are you able to have your players know your scheme so well? Because we've seen that throughout other regimes. Sometimes the scheme does not stick, and we heard it from Lynn. You have to take it really, really slow.
Yeah, and I love that because it's and the quote that I took from that was my favorite thing he said is make a little look like a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that was so important for me was, and he also followed that up with saying, I would rather go too slow than too fast. I don't want guys to get left behind. I don't want guys to feel like they can't ask questions or they can't fully grasp this defense before we move on. I want sound football. I want guys that are disciplined, that know what they're doing, that are versatile, can play multiple positions. But to be able to play multiple positions, you have to understand multiple positions.
Yeah.
You can't just say, go play the 3-tech and next play, go play DN for me. But we haven't spent a lot of time on both of those with you. We're going to slow it down. We're going to break it down. Guys, he said in the past at UCLA last year, we're getting a little anxious saying, hey, let's speed it up a little bit. Let's get to the next step. But he said, no, I'm going to slow it down. You'll see the proof of that why. And obviously they had a top 5, top 10 defense last year in the country. I love his philosophy of making sure everybody understands. And that's something that we talked about last year with USC, with them developing into a better defense, was they can take that next step from 1A to 1B to 1C. But hearing Coach Lynn talk, you don't always have to do that. You can stay at 1 and do 1 really well without having to get to 1A, 1B, 1C if you have the players in place to do that and everybody knows their assignment and all 11 guys are on the same page constantly on the field. I'd rather have that than a bunch of guys flying around guessing or questioning what that play call was instead of doing the same play over and over and being comfortable and dominant at that.
In terms of his teaching skills, when he was talking about it, I thought of you, Cody, because I'm sure you can speak to this, but he admitted, he was like, it was my first time teaching college kids at UCLA, and he was like, I didn't realize that you're kind of starting from...
Assume nothing.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
He was like, in the NFL, you assume that people have a certain understanding of football
Which
concepts.
They do, yeah.
And he said it made me a better teacher, so I thought that was fascinating as well.
I love that he's humble enough to admit that, too. Throughout the press conference, I love his humility of saying, I'm still learning, right? I'm 34 years old. I'm a younger defensive coach, and, obviously... the coaching world's gone younger at the coordinators and head coaching positions. But I love the humility of saying, I don't know it all. I'm not coming up here and telling you guys I have every single answer, right? I'm still learning. I'm developing as a coach. I'm learning from my players. And that goes a long way for a player to know that your coach can have an open conversation with you, and it's not just, this is how it's done, this is what I said, this is my world, my way or the highway, get out. I can have open conversations and learn just as much from you as you can from me, and I love that. And the biggest quote to me throughout the entire day, kind of touching on this a little bit, was that they asked him a lot about scheme, right? A lot of those questions were scheme. What was your scheme? Why is it better than what we've had before? We had the speed defense. Now we're going to more of attacking style defense. What's your scheme all about? He went on to say, look, I have a scheme in place. There's a core value in my scheme, but I'm going to adapt the scheme to my players. And I've talked about that before in some of his interviews. I love that. That is my favorite thing about Coach Lynn, is that, again, it's not him saying, this is my scheme. If you can play for me and you can fit in this, great. If you can't, then you're going to ride the bench and never see a day on the field. No, I'm going to find ways to, yes, you're going to find your top-end players, your starters. You're going to recruit guys that can fit and be versatile. Like he said, can play any position. I want that. But at the end of the day, I don't have a 4-2-5 or whatever it may be set in place of this is what we do, and if you can't do it, get out. I'm going to adapt to you guys, and I'm going to find the best way for me to be the best coach and you guys that have the most success on the field as well. And I absolutely love that. He is the definition of a player's coach. I don't even play defense, and I would have loved to play for this guy.
Well, you talk about the humility. I thought this was fascinating and kind of funny at the same time. He spoke about how he had to go to the other defensive staff. He had to go to the other coaches and ask them the best way to evaluate high school tape, because he's so used to seeing pro tape that he was like, I don't know how to project an 18, 16, 17-year-old kid. So I thought that was fascinating as well. Like, he's still really learning at the college level what to look for and whatnot.
Yeah, and speaking of the pro side of things, that was another thing that got me excited listening to him talk, is not only, yes, developing and learning how to recruit high school kids, but where his foundation came from, right? He talked about Rex Ryan. He coached, he scouted, and played for Rex Ryan. That's really where it all comes from. But then he went on to say also guys that have influenced my defensive play calling, Gus Bradley, Ken Norton, Brian Norwood, all those guys have had influence. A lot of my football nerds, football junkies, if you will know some of those names, some big-time defensive coordinators in the past. But I just love all, and then obviously his father, Anthony Lynn, as well, was a huge influence on him. But I love the fact that he can, and yes, he's going to take some time learning how to recruit and understand, and he had an experience last year at UCLA doing that, but I love the NFL-style background. I love the influence that he has on his play calling. I mean, what better group of guys to have than the people that he's learned from, and obviously having a dad in the NFL, so you spent a lot of time around high-level football. It's just the perfect guy for this hire. I'm so excited, and that press conference, again, you can always win a press conference, yes, but checking all the boxes for me, and I can't wait to see the product that's going to be on the field, not only this spring, but as it develops into the fall and then into the season.
I don't know if you caught this, but I thought it was interesting that Lynn said that his scheme is a similar defensive scheme to what Nua worked with Mike McDonald at Michigan.
Yeah.
And he was like, not only are you familiar with the concepts, but you know the roster. I thought that was fascinating as well.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up Coach Nua as well, because we've talked so much about all these new faces on the defensive side of the ball, which it is important, right? When you kind of revamp your entire defensive staff, but I love that we kept Coach Nua, and then Coach Lynn went on to talk about trust between the staff, right? Being able to have those difficult conversations, and it sounds like Coach Nua is going to fit in perfectly. Obviously, Belk, Ince, and Henderson and Lynn have a lot of history together, obviously, so they're going to know each other, but it's still going to take some time getting used to one another. But he already said in the short period that we've had together, and obviously Coach Nua, Taylor Mays, who's still here as well, some of these coaches that have been here under Lincoln, they're getting comfortable with each other already, and they know to have a successful staff, you have to be able to have those difficult conversations. You have to be able to put your ego aside and to ask Coach Ince, hey, what do you think we should do linebacker-wise? Hey, Coach Belk, what do you think would help us be more successful in the secondary? And going to Henderson, what's your philosophy on this on the defensive line? You've got to be able to do that to have a successful staff, and I love that Coach Lynn brought that up and said that there's already a trust forming between this staff and the guys that have already been here to where we can start taking those next steps and having those conversations to make this football team better.
Last thing from me from Lynn was he was asked to describe the tenets of his defense, and he had 3 points. He said, obnoxious communication, So great. He said pre-snap, knowing the situation and personnel. The second point was playing with shocking effort every single play. And he said, I think that starts in practice. And then the third and final, he said, we're going to attack. We're going to attack the quarterback. We're going to attack the run. And he put a bow on all of it by saying all three of those things, your talent level doesn't matter. Anyone can do those three things. And I thought that was an excellent way to kind of summarize what you're about.
Let's start tomorrow. I'm ready. I mean, those 3 points got me excited. I agree with that. I mean, that's a great foundation. Obviously, there's going to be some other things that go with that, with a 1A, 1B, 2B. But I love that foundation, right? And I love what he said. Now, yes, you have to go get the 5 stars, the 4 stars, the talented players. You want to have a great recruiting class. But again, those 3 things right there, you have to have a culture in place. You have to have a mindset in place to be successful on that side of the football, especially going into the Big Ten, because you're going to face multiple offenses. It isn't going to be like the Pac-12 where you know what you're going to face pretty much week in and week out with the air raid, with the spread. You're going to face some spread, some air raid, some pro style, a team that can run the football 30, 40 plus times a game. So you have to be able to adapt, to be able to read a defense, to understand week in and week out. What I saw last week is going to change, but a lot of that starts with mindset and attitude. And I love the obnoxious communication is probably my favorite part. There's so many things within the world of football, the games within the game, like I talk about pre-snap, that are different post-snap, right? You have to be able to watch so much film and understand, and that's all effort, right? That's the next part of it, is the effort, the mindset that you have going into it. You have to be able to understand, communicate that all 11 guys are doing their job on the field. And then the last thing is my favorite: attack, right? We saw how aggressive UCLA's defense was. Not to give away anything, we read the comments. I'm going to preview some of that coming up soon with another video explaining a little bit more of D'Anton Lynn's aggressive play calling and the style of defense that the Bruins played with last year. But I love that. We're not going to let the fight come to us. We're going to take it to you. We're going to come downhill, and we're going to hit you in the mouth, and we're going to attack from the first snap until the game's over.
Alrighty, well, moving to the next person in the press conference.
Who is next?
Henderson.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not supposed to be biased here, but he was my favorite of the day.
This was, yeah.
You can tell why he's so successful on the recruiting trail.
Yeah.
He's just, the energy in the room just like lit up when he came in, because he just has that energy to him. And
it's got to be a defensive line thing, because it was,
That's
now
a good
take
point.
the voice out of it, but it was like Coach O type of run through a brick wall for your coach. Now, you always have coaches that have different personalities. You never want to fake it. You always got to be the same person day in and day out. So I'm not saying you have to have this personality to be a winning coach or to have great recruiting, because we just saw Lynn, who spoke. I love the way he spoke about everything we just talked about: the effort, versatility, what he looks for in players, what he looks for in development. But then you have Coach Henderson, who's that dog work mentality, like you said, that comes in, and I guarantee you everyone in that press conference was ready to run through a brick wall. I mean, at least they should have been. And everyone in the comments was as well in the live chat. But I'm with you on that. That's a Coach O, Henderson, that defensive line type of mentality. And I knew it right away. I texted you when he walked in with the outfit. I knew.
Yeah, you did.
He had the double long sleeves on with the cutoff and the SC, not a SC hat, but a SC baseball hat.
Yeah.
The flat brim with the upside down Oakleys on top. I said, this is the type of guy I'm playing for.
He looked like he's been here for like 5 years already. He looked so comfortable. The uniform fit him. It was cool to see.
It was awesome. But yeah, it was just I know you'll got some quotes and some stuff we'll go over, but just initial thoughts. I mean, loved it. I love the type of attitude he brought to that press conference. I love the way he spoke to everybody. Yeah. Even when reporters didn't mention their name, he said, "Hey, can I? What was your name, please, for future? Nice to meet you," to everybody.
He made sure to say their name again after.
Looked everybody in the eyes. Was very respectful. That's just the type of person, especially in recruiting, as a parent, that you want teaching young men and teaching them how to be respectful and leaders on and off the field. Besides
making sure that he knew everyone's names, the thing that stood out to me immediately was that he talked about kind of the self-responsibility or what he puts on himself for his players. He was like, if I'm telling them to control the things they can control and I'm not doing that, then what type of leader am I? And he talked about like having the discipline, the right attitude, the things you can control. So I thought it was just very authentic that he is willing to, look internally and see how is he presenting to his players and how will that reflect on him and their relationship. I just thought it was you could tell off the bat both of those things, the names and what he described, that he's a people person and he truly does care about people.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was the first thing I wanted to talk about with Coach Henderson, was outside of all the football stuff, his personal background, right? The type of coach and person that he is when he went on. And if you, again, please don't leave the podcast, but if you have an opportunity, go back and listen to Coach Henderson talk about what he's gone through in his life. And I'll just summarize it. I'm not saying it in the same passionate way he did, so I apologize. But he talked about losing his mom at the age of 9 and being open and vulnerable in that room. First time meeting a lot of those people.
Yeah.
He talked about losing his mom at the age of 9, went on to say, I never knew my father. I never met my dad. I never knew my father. I moved in and lived with my grandma, who I ended up losing, and she passed away my senior year of high school. Then I went on and went and played college football. And my aunt, who was in the household, kind of became the guardian, the caretaker, if you will. I lost her the following year when I was a freshman in college.
Insane.
I was the oldest of my siblings. I still had younger siblings to look out for. I took that mindset of, I've got to provide for them, right? And I love that. It was that, like he said, that dog work mentality that, you know, no one's going to feel sorry for you. I've got to be able to keep pushing. And was he hurting? Sure. Absolutely. That's so tough to go through as a person, to be able to keep pushing through and keep going and being a successful person, because sometimes when you go for that, it's easy, or go through that, it's easy to think, why are all these things happening to me? Why is this, you know, it's tough for me. I don't want to keep fighting. And I'm not saying that that's, sometimes you have to do that. You have to take a step back and need some help and some support. But I love that one of our most important positions on the field, defensive line, is being ran by this man that's gone through so much, that can relate to some of these players, that is so open and vulnerable about talking about his personal background, because he started out just mentioning about losing his mom at 9 and then never knew my dad. Someone later on in the press conference said, you know, can you open up a little bit more?
They asked who did you lean on?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was tough to hear the press conference too without the mic. So
look, I will PSA, I'm sorry that it was hard to hear the questions. I wanted to mic up the reporters, but you had to pass around a mic, and that was vetoed. They were like, that's going to take too long for the presser, and it's already 3 hours long, so we were vetoed. I tried to put extra mics. I'm sorry. Okay,
and again, it was it was tough watching live to hear what the question was, but I love how comfortable he was with saying, then I went, my grandma was in a household, I lived with my grandma, I lost her, and then I lost my aunt as well the following year, but now going forward, I became a successful coach, right? I played football. I went on, I'm coaching at a very high level right now, and I still look out for my family, my younger siblings. In the offseason from the NFL, I make sure they're okay. I make sure they're doing good. That's my first priority. That tells me, again, I wrote in all caps, the perfect player coach. He is going to love these kids, love these young men that he's coaching, care about them, get the most out of them. He made Aaron Donald, again, one of the greatest football players to ever step foot on the football field. In my opinion, he made him better. He got him to go to that next level, because you can do so much from an athletic standpoint, but when you can tap into that personal level of things where you fully trust your coach and you feel comfortable with them and you know that you can give everything you have and they're going to have your back, you're limitless in what you can do on the field and off the field as well. And I love that. So I had to first, before we get into the football side of things, just talk about his background. And when I say run through a brick wall, that is the full definition of that. And just, again, his vulnerability and talking to us. And he didn't owe us that explanation. He didn't owe us any of that. But to open up and say, hey, this is what you're going to get. This is the type of person I am day in and day out. It's authenticity. It's being the same person when I'm in the locker room, when I'm inside the facility, when I'm on the field, when I'm off the field. That's going to get the most out of your players, and I love that.
Well, you talk about a player's coach, and I just remember this while you were answering. The whole reason he started talking about his past was that he was asked, are there non-negotiables when you're recruiting a player? And his whole point was, no. Like, I don't look at people's backgrounds and automatically cross them out for their potential, and related it back to himself. And I was like, wow, that's someone who's really thought about it all and has a good understanding of, I guess, life. But like, it was just really cool to see. And it was funny because someone in the comments said, give this man a TED talk, because he was just so open and authentic about his life, his journey. And he was like, I'm everything I go through, I'm supposed to go through. He just seems like someone who is sure and confident in himself because he's been so battle tested in that sense by life. And it just seems like not only a great person in general, but a great person to have on your staff, given how unique college football is and how many personalities and people's lives are around you all the time.
Yeah, I love that. And he said, I spent most of my life alone, right? You do a lot of thinking that way especially when you lose the people close to you.
Yeah.
You've got to go through some things that not a lot of people go through, but he's seen both sides of it. And I love the first thing he said about recruiting was, I want all the smoke.
That was so funny.
I'll out recruit anybody. I've had all walks of life, right? He's gone through the difficult times, losing family members, being on his own. He said it himself, I spent most of my life alone, but he's also seen the other side, right? He's a successful coach. He has those positives that come with that, right? With the money and being able to work out of that tough situation to where he is now in life. He can relate to both sides, right? I know what it takes to get there, and I know what it takes to keep it when you get there and not forget about where you come from. And that's as a high school kid, as a kid that's got all the want to in the world and determination, and you want to be great and you want to have NFL aspirations, playing for a guy like this at a defensive line level, because I'm an offensive guy, so I'm always going to be a little torn on this, but I think defensive line is the toughest position, the most gritty, dog work mentality. And I've already been previewing it. Let me use the words that he said. I wrote them down. He said, developing a culture, mindset, dog work mentality, discipline, attitude, grit, being obsessed with greatness, and having a killer instinct. That is the perfect summarization of a defensive lineman. That's what you have to have, because, again, I think O-line, D-line are the toughest positions in football when it comes to physicality-wise. Yeah. But at the end of the day, defensive line, you're facing double team, sometimes triple team. If you're Aaron Donald, if you're some of the very good players, you're playing inside, you're playing outside, you're going against guys that want to take your head off every single play, right? They want to stop you from everything that you're doing to get to the quarterback, to get to the running back. You have to have that mindset of, I'm going to outwork you, out-physical you. I'm going to do everything it takes to be successful. And guess what? You don't win MVPs. You don't get the Patrick Mahomes love, the Lamar Jackson love. You don't get the Joe Burrow love, the Caleb Williams. You don't get those, the Bear Alexander type of people. You don't get those numbers and the accolades. Now, yes, you can win, Defensive Player of the Year. It's starting to trend towards that, how important an edge rusher is. And Aaron Donald being an interior defensive lineman who moves around a lot. Yes, you're going to get recognition, but you're not going to win a Heisman Trophy playing interior defensive line. I can promise you that. But you've got to have that mentality. I'm going to do whatever it takes to be great and to help my defense. And Coach Henderson's is the most important person, or the perfect person to help develop those young men into having those mindsets.
Setting the tone for sure.
Perfect.
All the smoke quote was so funny to me. Loved because he was asked, you're seeing with the evolution of what's happening with college football right now. He's like, the person who was asking the question said, you're seeing coaches leave college and go to the NFL so you can just bypass recruiting and what's happening. And he was like, no, I want all the smoke. I'm fine with coming back to college football. So I thought that was hilarious.
Well, it's tough too. I mean, it is. And from playing both, the NFL offseason, especially if you don't make the playoffs or you don't go to the Super Bowl, you have 3 or 4 months to reset, to relax. And obviously you're working out on your own and you're doing all that. Even as a coach, though, you can go take those trips and spend time with family. Yes, you have to, go do stuff if you're at the Senior Bowl or the Combine. You're going to have to go look at players, but you're not recruiting like you were in college football. So for him to understand that and take on that role and not say, hey, I'm going to continue to recruit. But no, he said, I want all the smoke. Bring it on. You want to out-recruit me? Bring it on. I'm going to do everything I can, especially to keep the guys that are in L.A. to stay here. And I love that. He's been with the Rams. He's been in L.A. He understands the culture and what it's like. Keeping guys in our own backyard, not allowing them to go across country or go to some of the other Big Ten schools. We're going to keep them home. And the 4 or 5 stars, the schools that have winning culture, that produce these high-end athletes, I'm going to go face-to-face, go talk to them at their house, go to the school, and I'm going to keep them here. And I love that. And the last thing that I'll say about Coach Henderson is really backing up what Coach Lynn said. He said, when you have the right people in the building and you love the university and love your staff, you can have those tough conversations that you need to have to get better. And it sounds like they're already building that trust within the staff, again, to take out the pride aside, push that away and say, hey, I'm going to lean on these other great coaches that we have on the staff to get better. And it starts with Coach Lynn and it starts with Coach Riley, and we're going to build the perfect staff. And I really feel like we're doing that. And I'm so excited that Henderson's a part of that, and I can't wait to see what the defensive line looks like in the spring.
Yeah, talk about, as Riley said, a shot of momentum. He was the shot of momentum for today in the presser. Everyone in the chat seemed pretty excited about that. I didn't mention this at the top, but Riley was asked about Henderson's co-defensive coordinator title, and I will just make sure I'm quoting him correctly. He said, Danton is the defensive coordinator. There's no splitting duties there. So we mentioned this in previous episodes. Yeah, that is to be expected. One final takeaway from me from Henderson was, and I know this, but the coaching circle is really small. Like, I feel like everyone has some degree to another person, and Henderson really exemplified that by thanking Danton's father, Anthony Lynn, for giving him his start in coaching. He said, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Anthony. And then apparently when Henderson was at the Chargers, Danton was a quality control assistant. I'm botching the title. Like I said, this is an instant reaction episode, so I don't have my facts completely straight.
We're reading the notes.
Yeah.
This is all like rough draft going straight into the podcast. But I think it was a QC, but it's something along those lines, yes.
But he said, I knew from at that point that Danton was going to be a coordinator. He was like, I could just tell that he was that smart. But I thought that was interesting, kind of a full circle moment there.
Yeah, and I guarantee you that Lynn was a huge factor in getting Henderson to come from the NFL back to college.
That's a good point.
And even talking about that, and I forgot to mention that when Lincoln was speaking or when Coach Lynn was speaking, he was asked who was in charge of making the hires, but they both kind of did it together.
Said it was collaborative.
Yeah, collaborative. They went in there and he said, hey, here's some guys that I'd like, and he mentioned some guys he would like. That just means already that continuity, them working together. And then obviously Jen Cohen made it happen and helped out a lot with that as well. But for them to work together on putting a staff that they know can be successful and be the most efficient defensive staff that they can find, to be able to work together on that already shows me with Riley and Lynn that they're already on the same page, and that's huge to have. And again, a word we kept talking about was continuity and trusting your staff. So again, I'm so pumped. Whoever got the job done, whether it was Lynn, Riley, Cohen, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have Henderson on the staff, and what a great coach for these guys on the defensive line to get to learn from.
Next up in the presser was linebackers coach Matt Entz. And at the top of the show, I don't know if you remember, we talked about how we were on the same page, Cody, and this was the prime example. So he starts talking. He gave like a brief statement, which even Lincoln Riley didn't do. It's very much a head coach thing to do. So I wrote in my notes immediately, obviously speaks like someone who's been a head coach before. And then I
texted you.
I look and I see, Cody texted me. I look at it and you say, you could tell he's been a head coach before. He went straight into the briefing before questions, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Well,
podcasting same page.
It reminded me of like a post-game presser, right?
Yeah,
when you're a head
100%.
coach, you walk in and say, hey, today went well or today didn't go well, this, whatever you may say. And then at the end, even the perfect head coaching term, now I'm going to open up to questions. Yeah. So I immediately texted you and said, you can tell this guy's been a head coach before. But
yeah, well, that's why it was so interesting hearing from him, because he was the first hire, and it was so shocking, I think, for the college football world, that I wanted to know, like, what was the thought process? How did this happen? He said that he wasn't expecting USC to reach out. So it sounded like this was a Lincoln Riley thought. Lynn talked about how he didn't know. And so it seemed like and I don't think Riley knows him as well, but it seemed like
they had mutual friends.
Okay.
Is really how they got connected.
Again,
one of his,
small world.
Yeah, he said, look, we've had mutual coaching friends in the coaching world. That's how we got connected. But yeah, and that was, to your point, that was, I think, both of us, the biggest shock or surprise hire of the offseason for the defensive side of the ball. You go get an FCS national championship winning coach at North Dakota State, such a top program at that level, and you have him come over here and be a position coach, right? And he answered that perfectly, though, at the beginning, right? And that was one of the first questions everyone asked was, what made you leave a head coaching job to come take a position job? And he said, you have to understand the power of the logo here at USC. It's one of the top blue blood schools in the entire country. And I love that he was very open about it, said, hey, look, I had other coaching offers. I had head coaching opportunities elsewhere. I interviewed for some head coaching jobs at the FBS level. And one of the biggest things was not a lot of FBS experience or no FBS experience, right? Yeah. He hasn't coached at that level yet. And he was very upfront and transparent, and I love that. And that's a lot of the things that happened with this entire staff was they were asked, do you want to still be a head coach someday? Is this just – you have to understand that, yes, it is a little bit of a stepping stool sometimes of position job to a DC, to a head coach, or some guys go straight position job to a defensive coordinator, or like Dan Lynn going from NFL down to college as a defensive coordinator. But for Coach Entz, he even said, look, I want to be a head coach someday. I told Lincoln Riley face-to-face in my interview, I want to sit in that seat somewhere else, not obviously saying I'm coming for your job. And he said, but Lincoln was a little
not get a job?
taken back by that comment, I think, because I said, hey, I want to sit and have the role that you have someday elsewhere or wherever it may be in the country as a head coach at a high-level Division I program, and I want everyone on my staff to have that, and I'm sure Lincoln does as well. So, you could, like we said, going back to that, you could tell he's been a head coach before. Yeah. He spoke in a lot of those ways, but what a great hire and someone that has a lot of experience of winning football, and that's something that he backed up about the FCS level is, look, it doesn't matter what level you're coaching at. Now, obviously the size, the speed, the strength, all that changes from level to level, but at the end of the day, it's still 11 versus 11. You've got to have a great scheme. You've got to be able to lead young men, and you've got to be able to go out there and win football games, and he's already proven that in the college football world.
So it obviously seems like he wants a linebacking core that can read and react quickly, which kind of fits hand in hand with Lynn's idea of going slow and making sure everyone knows their responsibility, because you can't play fast if you don't know why you're here and what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I've got a couple quotes right here to kind of back that up. And I love the football side of things he said, right? He talked about being a head coach and going to position coach, but he talked about how to get better at the linebacker position from a year ago. And the first thing he said is, I look for what type of football IQ do you have, what type of growth do they have, and what type of retention do you have? I love that. Those are so important, especially at the quarterback of the defense, right? A middle linebacker, you're reading, you're directing. There's a reason that in the NFL that there's a green sticker and a earpiece in the quarterback's helmet, and then there's an earpiece on the linebacker's helmet. Those are the only two players on the field because you are the quarterback of the defense. So I love that. You have to be able to teach guys to where they're not playing slow. And that was some of our breakdowns last year from some of those games. The Cal game sticks out specifically, where you see guys that are just a half second late or maybe thinking too much and not playing full speed. And if you do that at high-level college football, especially in the Big Ten or in the Power 5, you're done. If your feet are stuck in the mud and you're not reacting, you're not dissecting a defense, you're not having the ability to play fast, you're not going to be successful, right? And you're going to give up a lot of big-time plays. And we were one of the worst, if not, I think the worst in the country at explosive plays, especially on the ground. And that's frustrating because you need to have surefire tacklers at that linebacker spot. And that was the next quote that he said. Always looking for speed, looking for great change of direction, and guys that can go through their hips when tackling. Not guys that are going to get out there and try to arm tackle or throw their shoulder and go for the knockout hit every time. I want guys that are tackling from the ground up, right? Have good feet, can move around, can move sideline to sideline, and then tackle from their hips, right? I'm a surefire tackler. I'm finishing every single play, and we're not going to lead the country in missed tackles. So I love some of those quotes he said, and then I love that he finished it with, and not the press conference, but kind of this part of the section talking about players and how to develop guys. I love that he said, you're only as good as your players, right? I understand that. I can be a national championship winning coach from the FCS level. I can have all the answers at the linebacker position. I can go back to my roots and coaching these young men, developing them. But if they're not at a direct proof of the product of me on the field and they're not retaining it and they're not going out there performing, I'm doing nothing. I'm not doing my job. I don't mean anything. I'm only as good as my players, and he understands that. And I think he had a great press conference, and I loved hearing him speak about the X's and O's of the football team.
I know I keep saying this, but I always enjoy these press conferences because I finally get questions answered. And something that we've talked about so long on this podcast in particular is that he has to know what winning football looks like. You know, you mentioned it.
Absolutely.
They won multiple national championships at North Dakota State. So I asked, finally, is there a common denominator with the teams you've been on that have won national championships? And I thought it was just really interesting. He said servant leadership, and he said the logo in front, kind of like in the coach speak world, we before me in that sense.
Yeah, we're not worried about the last name on the back. We're worried about the logo on the front. But I love that, and I'm glad you brought that up. That was kind of my last point too from his press conference, was reiterating what Lincoln said a year ago, right? About we've learned how, and Jonah Monheim, I think, is the one who had the quote. He said, we learned how to win football games. We learned how to be successful. Now we got to learn how to have a championship mindset. And that's exactly what Coach Ince said. He said, hold our kids to championship standards, right? I'm a process-oriented person. I'm not worried about the outcome. Now, obviously, the outcome is what everyone looks at, but I'm so worried about what the standard is and how guys are getting to that level of success, how you're going to go and it's not just on the field, right? Day in and day out, it's in the meal room, right? He talked about Eric Gentry getting his weight back up, holding that sustainable weight, how he can be successful, how he can really help guys get to that next level. It's all about the process. It's not just about the end result, and I love that. And the other thing that he said, kind of talking about that, is yes, he knows how to win championships, right? He's been a part of multiple national championship teams. He's been the head coach of those teams, but he said, I'm here to help drive the vehicle, but I'm not in charge of it, right? I understand what type of input I can have when Lincoln needs input from me, when Coach Lynn, Coach Henderson, that continuity, that trust that we've been talking about all episode that this coaching staff has. I'm a solution type of person, and I know how to help find solutions. That was a direct quote that he said, was that I know my role, right? I understand I'm not the head coach anymore, but I'm going to give as much input as possible and use and take from my experience, which I think is extremely valuable for this staff, to being able to take that next step and be a national championship competing football team and ultimately winning some national championships. Yeah,
I appreciated that he said, like, I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, I'm not trying to be the guy that speaks too much or has too many ideas.
Yeah.
Which And we've said it on this podcast, in order to take the role that he did, you have to be self-aware. You have to know what you're coming into.
Swallow
because
your pride.
you cannot go from everything under the sun is under your purview. You're making the shots, and now you're linebackers coach. Like, that will not jive if you don't know exactly what you're coming into.
And that goes back to the leadership of this program. Lincoln Riley sat there with Jen Cohen and I'm sure Dan Lynn, and they said, hey, we understand where he's coming from. We've got to have this difficult conversation now so this isn't an issue in the future.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Coach Lynn said, hey, I'm on board. Obviously, my goal one day is to be like you, Coach Riley. I want to be a head coach at a top FBS Power 5 school in my future. But right now, I understand I'm going to come here because of the power of the logo, and I want to help you win national championships, and I want to help you have a defense that is in your vision and Coach Lynn's vision and help you get to that next step. So I love that we have him. Again, my biggest surprise the entire offseason that we got him to come here and have his football knowledge. And that was one of the other things I wrote in all caps. Just the level of football knowledge on this defense is unbelievable. It really, in my opinion, is second to none. Not only the immediate level of the guys that we have on this staff, but the trees that they've come from, like the coaching trees that they've come from, the family that Coach Lynn has come from, and Henderson and them interacting together and having that history, and Coach Ince being a former head coach who won a national championship. And then the last guy we're going to talk about next, Coach Belk, coming from successful programs, right, and leading top-end defenses. So it's unbelievable, and this staff is just I'm so excited. I'm talking a lot. You can hear, I think, the excitement in my voice, but it's second to none really in the country, and I firmly believe that, and that's taken the bias out of it.
You're not biased?
I mean,
a little bit.
I'm a little biased. I mean, I might bleed Cardinal and gold, but at the end of the day, I really do believe.
You wouldn't be effusive if you didn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, go show me a better staff, right? And I mean, it's majority USC fans, so no one's going to go out there and look, but it really is like it's going to be difficult to find a better defensive staff in the country from top to bottom with the experience that Lincoln Riley has put together under Coach Lynn on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, last but not least was secondary coach Doug Belk. If you listen to previous episodes when we talked about the defensive staff news, I talked about this ESPN article that featured Belk. It actually was pretty true to his presser today. I thought it was funny. One of the quotes that we talked about in that episode, Cody, he actually re-said in the presser. He said, I don't think everyone should be coached the same, but everyone should be coached fairly. And I know you and I were big fans of that one.
Yeah, I love that. And I remember doing that episode. That was a quote that really stood out to me. And I love that he doubled down on that today, right? It wasn't just a one-time answer. It sounded good in the interview. That's his philosophy. He truly believes that, and he reiterated that in the press conference today. And it's so important to me as a quarterback to relate to that, because you've got to understand how to get the most out of your players, right? Not only as a coach, but as a player and as a leader, you have to understand that some guys you can go up to and yell at and get in their face and hoorah and get them excited, and they're going to respond well, right? They like that type of motivation. Other guys, if you have that same philosophy and you yell at them, get in their face, they're going to shut down, right? And you've got to be able to understand there is tough coaching, right? There's tough love in life. You're going to get that. But I knew that there were certain guys that I pull aside and not yell at them and call them out in front of the entire group or the entire offense. If I pull them to the side and said, hey, I need X, Y, and Z from you, I'm going to get more of a response from them. They're going to respect me more. They're going to do better on the field. They're not going to get in their head. And you've got to understand the fine line about how not everybody's coached the same. So I love that Coach Belk said that. And I think it's so important with, again, Coach Belk, another coach that has higher level experience, right? He was a defensive coordinator most recently at Houston. Now he's coming back to be a position coach. He understands how to coach a group of young men, how to get the most of them. And I think that's been a really consistent theme throughout this entire staff. And I'm so pumped to have Coach Belk here, part of it.
I was just about to say that. At the top, we talked about development. You could see in every presser, there's a finesse to teaching, and said, are they a visual learner? And then as you just talked about with Belk, he talked about what are you going to get out? How do guys respond? And so it really showed that not only are these guys teachers, but they know the little ins and outs of how to get the best out of someone and make sure that they're retaining that info. So I just thought that was really interesting, especially given how Riley kicked it off with, we want guys who are teachers or developers. Well, that's what they sounded like.
That literally needs to be the title of this episode, or that YouTube video is how to develop football players. It really is. And I love that they're all on the same page. And again, this is the fourth coach we've talked about, and I'm talking about the trust again, the understanding, the continuity of staff that hasn't spent a lot of time together, but they're already on the same page with their answers and their philosophies. And you can tell that they've been bouncing stuff off of each other, already been able to self-scout, watch the film from a year ago to dive into our own self-scout from USC's defense a year ago, and how can we not only talk to the players that are on the roster now, but how can we get better from watching film and the areas that we need to improve on? And again, put our pride aside and not say Coach Belk saying, hey, I came from Houston, or and saying I was a head coach before, let's do this, or Lynn saying at UCLA, we can all work together, and we have a phenomenal coaching staff. We can all work together and take different ideas and come up with, I guess, the best combined solution to how to get this defense from where it's been the last 2 years to being a dominant defense. And Coach Henderson talked about being a defense that's respected throughout the entire country.
Belk had a quote that made me feel like you would appreciate it. Cody, he said, I don't decide who plays, the tape does.
The eye in the sky never lies.
That's why.
It really is. And at the end of the day, and it kind of goes back to his philosophy. This is why, and I love Coach Belk too, because you had Henderson, who had you ready to run through a brick wall, right? The defensive line coach who's up at probably 4 a.m. every morning having coffee and energy drinks. And you have Coach Entz, who's been a head coach, kind of that same rah-rah type of energy to him. But then you had Coach Belk, Coach Lynn, kind of similar too, a little more laid back, a little more, I guess, philosophy, teaching type of quotes that they had throughout the press conference. Yeah, exactly. And you've got to have that, though. You've got to have a staff,
the balance,
that has a good match, just like any good team, any even in work environment, right? You always have those friend
personalities,
group, the friend group. You have the loud, the outgoing, the kind of laid back a little bit, but it works well and it meshes well together, and it's so important for the authenticity of it. And I love the calm and the laid-back demeanor that Coach Belk had. And he said, look, I'm not coming out here saying you got to do X, Y, and Z to play for me. I'm going to help you learn X, Y, and Z to be successful. But at the end of the day, it's also what Entz said. You're only as good as your players as a coach, right? The eye in the sky, the film, what you put out on tape at practice, what you put out in the weight room, what you put out on game day is going to help you play. Now, I'm going to teach you everything to be successful and to get to that point. But at the end of the day, you've got to go out and do it yourself, and I'm going to learn how to lead you the right way. But I love what Coach Belk said throughout that, and I think it really tied the entire press conference together, and it really doubled down on what the rest of the coaches were saying, and the trust and putting the pride aside and be able to work together to put that best product of USC defense on the field that the fans are going to be proud of.
Okay, I want your final thoughts, Cody, but before we do, just want to give a thanks to Audi. What if there was a portal to the future? Enter the fully electric Audi Q4 e-tron with advanced touchscreen infotainment system. Audi, the future awaits. And take your health to the next level with Symbiotica. Their premium, easy-to-take supplements fuel your body with key vitamins and minerals to help you reach peak performance on and off the field. Elevate your health today by going to Symbiotica.com and use code FIGHTON for 15% off site-wide.
Fight on.
Well, like I said, Cody, I want your final thoughts. This was kind of a energy drink for the offseason, if you will. It really put my mind back into where we are with this USC football team and program and what to look forward to this spring camp.
Yeah, I mean, it's 5:48 now. We've been down here or the press conference ended, I think, 4.5 hours ago, and I'm still excited. But a little bit of bring you back down to earth moment. It's still early on, right? It was just a press conference. They haven't even had a chance to get on the field with these players yet. We still got to continue to develop and recruit, both with these incoming freshmen and also in the transfer portal, the right players to fit Coach Lynn's scheme and his supporting cast around him. But at the end of the day, I can't wait to see the product on the field. And again, it's not going to be perfect day one. There's going to be some growing pains throughout spring, throughout summer, and ultimately into fall camp before season gets here. But I can't wait to see that process.
Yeah.
And I really can't wait for them to put the pads on for the defensive line, if I'm being honest.
100%.
I can't wait for day one of full pads and seeing Coach Henderson run out onto Howard Jones and the excitement level that he's going to have. But like I said, the first thing you have to do is hire a national championship winning staff on both sides of the football, and Lincoln Riley absolutely checked that box, and they just reiterated that today when we got to hear them talk, and I can't wait to see the product on the field.
Given what we heard from Lynn about how slow he takes things, especially in spring, are you adjusting your expectations for spring camp in that sense?
Yeah, it's going to take time, and you're going to go against a offense that is still going to have the same scheme, the same coach, the same play style, so they're going to be ahead of the defense, right?
Sure.
It's going to take time, but again, you go back to the game last year, and it hurts to say, but I only feel comfortable saying it because now he's on our side. But we struggled a little bit on the offensive side of the ball against UCLA's defense. So he does have a little bit of tape to pull from, of schemes that work. Now, obviously, you're going to implement everything because you're not getting ready to play USC, your own offense, for 12 weeks during the season. You're going to play other opponents. But at the end of the day, I think they can come out and be competitive in spring. But are they going to be dominant yet? Are they going to win every single day and be a perfect defense that we can't wait to play on Saturdays? No, it's going to take some time. And you know, I understand that. I'm sure all of our listeners and the fans understand that as well. But I love that Lynn's not trying to rush everything and rush the process. He said, look, I'd rather take it slower than, going too fast and guys fall behind. I want to make sure everybody knows step one, day one install before we go to day two. And if that takes 1 or 2 days before we get to the next step, I'm fine with that. But let's implement all that now and have all those tough conversations now. So by the time season comes around, we can play fast and play free.
I did one more pass through my notes just to make sure we got everything. And the final thought I guess I'll leave with is Riley was asked, there were so many openings in the NFL so far this offseason. Why did you want to stay at USC? Why is this the place you want to be? And he said, I want to get it right here. I want it really bad, not just for me, but for this program, the fans, the university. I'm at the place I want to be. So you also got some confirmation from the head coach that he really wants to reinvest in this program and get it back to what USC fans want it to be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and I think that's a good place to end this episode. And I want to reiterate that. I said at the beginning of the show, but you've got to give Lincoln his flowers, right? This is something going back to last year, and I'm going to step away from podcasting or broadcasting Cody for a second. I'm going to go to the alumni side of things.
Okay.
There's no one else in the country I want as a head coach at USC football right now. I am beyond happy, and there's a lot of players that I've talked to that back that up as well with Lincoln Riley and the job that he's done here. And go back to 2021, right? We won 4 games that year. It was very frustrating. Interim head coach, the sky is falling, all these things. It's unacceptable for USC to ever win 4 games, let alone be below 500, in my opinion, right? So the things that Lincoln's done in such a short amount of time has been unbelievable, right? To win 11 games his first year. Last year, we still won 8 games. We had an unbelievably tough second half of the schedule, going those 6 straight games, right? And that was so difficult. And this isn't to make excuses. Obviously, he's the first one to say we have to be better. Winning 8 games is unacceptable. We have to take it to that next level. We want to be a national contending team. And I don't want to give them too much credit, but there was some frustration and negativity, not only around the defense, but around Lincoln last year as well. And there were some outlandish things that were said in the comments and all of that. And again, I don't want to give them any credibility, but I am so excited for the future of USC football. And we mentioned this is the most important offseason in recent memory for the Trojan football program, and Lincoln Riley is off to a great start. He went out and said, look, I'm going to silence everybody, and whether he hears it or reads it or knows what the fans are saying and all that or not, whatever, I don't think he really cares, but at the end of the day, he knows I have to have a great defense to win national championships, right? I can be the best play caller in all of college football, but if I don't have a defense year in and year out that's going to hold our opponents, that's going to be dominant, that's going to be feared by other teams like the Brian Cushing days, the Clay Matthews, the Ray Malou, like those days, to me, the Wild Bunch up front, right? And I know I'm going down memory lane a little bit for some Trojan fans, but you've got to get back to that defense wins championships mentality, especially going to the Big Ten. Lincoln Riley has done that, right? And I want to give him his flowers, his credit. I'm so excited as a former player, as an alumni, as someone who bleeds Cardinal and gold. I cannot be more excited, and I hope I'm speaking for a lot of fans out there about the staff that Lincoln has put together and how serious he's taken this offseason with Jen Cohen and everything that they've done. And again, Jen Cohen's in her first year. To have this type of impact and to say, Lincoln, what do you want to get done? And her saying, okay, let's go take care of it. Hiring 4 of 7 of your dream hires or of the staff that you wanted to get 4 of the 7 and to pull head coaches and NFL coaches and defensive coordinators to build this staff is unbelievable. To go get the defensive coordinator who had one of the top defenses across town at UCLA, to have him come to the dark side or the other side of, it's a rivalry, right? That's little brother. They call us little brother. It's for him to flip and come over to USC. I'm going on. This is my final rant of the episode. But huge credit to Lincoln Riley. This football program is in a great direction. I love that Lincoln's the head of this program, and I can't wait to see what he does in year 3 and going into the Big Ten. Is it going to be perfect right away? No, we're going to continue to have to build this roster, absolutely, but the staff is in place to go compete at a championship level, and I can't wait to see how the rest of this offseason, ultimately next fall, kind of falls into place. No
one can put a bow on a podcast episode like you can, Cody. Well done. I don't know what else to say.
I had to say it. It just had to be said, and we've got to be thankful for what we have, right? I don't want it to sound like, and I'm not trying to get all preachy up here and all that, but again, Lincoln Riley is the right man for the job. We've seen what he can do and what he's capable of at this program, and I can't wait to see the future and what he can do for USC football.
You went into wrapping a bow on it again.
Yeah, so I'm done. I'm done talking. This is, again, an instant reaction episode. It went a little bit longer maybe than we anticipated. I don't know. We had a lot of great stuff. As it always does, yes. To talk about
it was definitely off the cuff.
Yeah, we'll be back.
I'm a little nervous about that, but hopefully you like our thoughts just raw. That's what they were.
It really was. Yeah, and please, comments. Let us know what you think, too. If you watched the press conference. If you haven't, again, finish this episode. Watch us on the podcast. Then go back and watch that episode or watch the press conference on YouTube. But again, I'm done. I'm excited. I'm ready to run through a brick wall. I'm going to go find Coach Henderson right now and have him give me a little pep talk. But I love you guys. Fight on. Next week, I promise we'll be back with questions.
Yes.
And we're trying to set up some interviews coming up as well. So a lot of stuff to look forward to. But I am out. I'm done.
Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for today's reaction episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. That's Cody. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time.